The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Welcome to another edition of the Hoop Ball Sacramento Kings podcast. I'm your host, Christian Villere. You can find me on Twitter at MyBuddyChris. For all of Hoop Ball Sacramento Kings coverage on Twitter, it's at HoopBallKings. And for all of your NBA news, NBA fantasy news, and Sacramento Kings coverage period, it's hoop-ball.com. Go there, get the season pass now. If you're playing fantasy basketball, it gets you access to all of the premium content Hoop Ball puts out. If you are a new user to DraftKings, you deposit $10 there. That will get you the season pass for free. You can find this show on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, as well as the iHeartRadio app, which is available for free to download in the iTunes and Google Play stores. On this episode of the show, we have Sacramento Kings beat blogger for Hoop Ball, Mr. John Schifferle. He and I get into the game against the Jazz. There is a little bit of news that we touched on from the Sacramento Bees beat reporter Jason Anderson regarding the rotation, and Harry Giles. He played extremely well on Sunday. We delve into a little bit of that. Also, this episode was streamed live on Periscope, as if you needed to know that, but it was, and we actually completed it successfully. That was fun as well. Anyhow, enjoy this episode of the Hoop Ball Sacramento Kings podcast. Here we are, hopefully on Periscope. Hopefully it's working. Giving it another try here on the Hoop Ball Sacramento Kings podcast with our Sacramento Kings beat blogger, Mr. John Schifferle. How are you on this Tuesday evening, sir?
Not too bad. Doing all right. How are you?
Can't complain. We're talking Kings. They're 10-10 after 20 games. Are you excited?
Well, recently it's been a little disappointing, but overall 10-10 is great. I don't really know why I wouldn't be excited with that, but the recent play has certainly been a letdown.
Letdown how? Letdown in what ways for you?
Well, the Warriors game was definitely winnable, and I think I saw Jason Anderson tweet about this, but he mentioned the fact that these two games are really it's going to be easy to look back at losing to the Warriors when they're down Steph Curry and Draymond Green, and then losing to the Jazz when they're struggling, and looking at it as potentially a point in the season where they really could have picked up a couple wins that, if it's a tight playoff race, could have really come in handy. So we'll see how that ends up. But at 10-10, it's hard to not be thrilled with where they ended up, because there's no way you could have expected this going in.
I don't think, well, maybe somebody out there in the ether could have predicted.
Yeah,
a 10-10. What?
Reasonably expected.
Yeah, but the vast majority of folks out there were not thinking this was going to be the start. This start has happened before, as we've mentioned many a time. I think they've blitzed the league. The league is now adjusting. They have their stuff on film, and it's come down to, can you stop the Kings from getting out in transition? And in the half court, can you stop De'Aaron Fox from doing what he wants to do right off the bat? He right now, it doesn't seem to me, wants to go to a counter. That is not what he wants to do, and I can guarantee you that the road to 27-55 is paved with De'Aaron Fox passing it to Justin Jackson on the wing with 15 seconds left in the shot clock, and Justin Jackson giving you a deer in the headlights.
Yeah, one thing that I will say about Justin Jackson, just because I think at this point I probably am more interested in what he gives than most people are, but I think he's one of the around a half a turnover per game, something like that, or half a turnover per 100 possessions. Something pretty remarkable. But as much as he doesn't do a lot, I'd also say he doesn't hurt the Kings in a ton of ways. But I do get your point with Fox driving in. I'd rather see him just go all the way and either draw a foul or try and finish.
And not to pick on Justin Jackson, but passing to Iman Shumpert on the wing with 15 seconds left in the shot clock, passing to a non-primary option, I would say maybe outside of Bogdan for sure and Buddy, it gets rough for that offense when he's giving up the ball and there doesn't look to be any kind of structure as to what the Kings will pursue throughout the rest of the possession. Sunday night, they played the Jazz in Sacramento. We alluded to that a little bit. This was disappointing for me because Donovan Mitchell was not playing. They relied a lot on Ricky Rubio in that first half. He had 23 points, completely obliterated De'Aaron Fox. They looked like the better team. Rudy Gobert came out there, and if you had listened to the podcast earlier that day before you went to watch the game, you would have heard me say that Rudy Gobert was going to have a bounce-back game. He was going to play better than he did against Willie Cauley-Stein there in the game on Wednesday. That happened to be the case. He was definitely asserting himself inside. There was more than enough room for the Kings to win this ball game, but they came out flat. Probably had something to do with the fact they played the night before in a very emotional game that took a lot out of them. On the floor, though, I mean, you were seeing a flat team as well. Was there anything that stuck out to your mind in particular with that game?
To some degree, I think Ricky Rubio, especially early in the game, it feels like the plan was to give him open shots. And to his credit, he knocked them down. And after he gets on a roll, probably sometime in the middle of the second quarter, the Kings should have paid a little more attention to him, and it just doesn't feel like they did. And he ended up with 27 points, so that's kind of what you get when you let someone just keep going and they're hot. But, yeah, beyond that, the Kings still just don't have a ton of rim protection, and Willie Cauley-Stein really struggled. Just a tough game. They get beat on the interior when they lose most of the time, and I think that's really what happened Sunday night.
I wonder, I was thinking about this during the game. I wonder why. I only watch the Kings for the most part. Why not put a guy in there who hadn't played a whole lot? Why not put a Yogi Ferrell in there? Why not put in a Scal? Somebody to give you a jolt of energy when it is very clear the team is in need of that, and they just don't go to it. There's plenty of room in there, but for some reason, Jaeger doesn't want to futz with the layout of what he's got going. He doesn't want to futz with the rotations that he's carefully crafted, that he's put into practice and worked pretty well so far this season.
Yeah, the one I'll agree with there, and I think I like Scal more than most people do, but I would like to see Scal play a little bit more in those situations just because he is still probably one of the better rim protectors on the team. And, you know, he can get up the floor well. He protects the rim. Like I said, he tries hard on the glass. He can shoot threes, at least when he's open. That's what we've seen in the past. So it would seem that he could be a fit for this roster, and I would like to see him get at least some small chance, especially because, in my eyes, at the beginning of the season, Willie Cauley-Stein was playing well enough offensively that I was willing to look past some of his issues on defense and rebounding, but if he's not playing at that super high level as a rim runner, then he's just not really doing much for you, and the defense really hurts. So I'd rather see Scal get at least some small rotation spots, prove what he can do.
It's something I'll count against Jaeger, and there's very little we can count against Jaeger so far in this season. But why just try something? Just give something a go there, because it's very clear they don't have enough energy. They didn't have enough energy going into the half. They came out in the second half. They picked it up a little bit. Harry Giles and that second unit there made a little bit of a run. Outside of that, the energy just cratered, and from there, the Kings were unable to stick with the Jazz. The Jazz came out like men on a mission. It was clear they wanted to set the pace from the very beginning. They wanted to establish themselves. Jay Crowder was playing well. Ricky Rubio clearly looking for his shot, which he did in that first half, and put the ball in the basket, which is something that he's not used to at an extremely high rate and at spots on the floor that you don't typically see him being productive from. They played really well without Mitchell. Joe Ingles was a non-factor there in that first half. Despite all that, they were they were right there, and they continued to play throughout the game with a constant energy and a constant pace that said to me, they really need that ball game. And that's what they ended up doing. They took that game away from the Kings when it was theirs to have. Let's get to Harry Giles, because that was a positive note from this game. He came out, he played well, especially in that second half. Like they mentioned on the broadcast several times, he missed that three-pointer, which would have cut the game to 1 and might have changed things for the Kings right there. But the layup in the open court, some of the passing there, what did you like from Harry Giles on Sunday?
Yeah, the passing was great, and he did a much better job of not forcing anything. And then overall, he's been more efficient. The game still looks like it's slowing down for him, but he's active and he's aggressive and he rebounds well. So, hard to be too disappointed with what he's done recently. And he had a really great move in transition that I can't remember when exactly it happened, but it just kind of shows the versatility he's got. And to me, the point in the game where the Kings really let it get away from them was the turnover on the inbounds pass at the beginning of the fourth. And I think it was Raul Neto who stole the ball, and then the Jazz immediately hit a three. And that kind of felt like at least a big enough shot to the Kings. I don't know if you'd say their moral, I don't know.
Just any kind of momentum they had there in that game. It kind of got shot in the foot. I would agree with you. Like the end. I remember that play specifically, and I threw my hands up and guffawed loudly so that anyone around me could have heard. Harry played well. I wonder a little bit, though. I want to get your opinion. Do you feel like it was a little bit of fool's gold, what he did, because it was a blowout, and a lot was made of the passes that he was able to capitalize on? Do you think that he was able to do that because it was a blowout? And yes, he was looking for those guys, but the opportunities were there more so because of what the condition of the game was in?
I don't know. It felt like he did a lot of what he did when the game was still at least within reach. And even so, he was getting garbage time minutes early in the season and just did not seem to know what he was supposed to be doing and where he was supposed to be. So I do think he's improved a lot, and I think a lot of the things that he did are like those passes just aren't easy to make, and they're passes that most players, like including Marvin Bagley at this point, would not make. So I believe in it. I would say that it's certainly one of the better lines he's going to post on like a per possession or per minute basis, but it definitely shows improvement.
I agree. I want to also ask you, the one-game stint in Stockton, a lot was made of that on the broadcast. Do you think that one-game stint had such a deep impact on his development as a player that it completely turned around how he is doing for the Kings right now?
I don't know if it did. Everyone seems to want to point to it being like a confidence boost. And to me, I almost view it not in the opposite sense, but in a little bit different sense. I think in a lot of ways, early in the season, he was trying to be the number one guy when he was on the floor, and he just couldn't be. And now I think he's trying to fill a role more. So being demoted to the G League and being asked to go play there, if anything, kind of signaled to him that he needs to fill a role before he can be that number one guy. And I think that's really I think also is the game slowing down for him. But to me, the biggest difference I notice in the way he plays is that he fits in better. And I think that adds up to just the fact that in Summer League and even in the preseason at times, he was the Kings' top option when he was out there. So, that's what I would attribute it to. Not necessarily a confidence boost from learning against, G League players for 20 minutes.
So more so like a resetting of expectations, because he did so well in that Summer League. He probably came in with some unhealthily high expectations, got the brunt of some really good NBA players. That may have hurt those expectations that he had. And now that he's kind of in that second wave a little bit, he now gets to see how he can be effective, where he can fit in, what he's good at, and how that can help the Kings. I think that's all very positive going forward. I want to see some more games of it, though. I want to see how he can both fit in and, like he did on Sunday, look for those ways to be effective and show those skills that he's got that we've heard of or that we had heard all of last year. Is there any more that you want to see from him? Is there any more that you're expecting to see? Because I know the little bit that he played in college, I'm sure you saw it because you are the basketball Illuminati or basketball oracle of this podcast, however you want to phrase it.
From him specifically, just, again, sort of playing a little bit more under control. And I think if you look early on, he was like leading the Kings in shots per 100 possessions. And to me, he was just taking a lot of bad shots, and he did that in Summer League as well. In Summer League, they went down a little more than they did in early on in the season. But, I think he's taking that out of his game. So just playing a little more under control, playing within the system a little bit more, and, making passes on the move. I think he also got a little too focused on taking the ball in the high post and waiting for someone to cut. And I think I'd rather see him try and make something happen a little bit more regularly.
I saw in a tweet on my way to record this podcast from Mr. Jason Anderson of the Sacramento Bee that Jaeger is looking at some possible changes to the rotation. He's doing an overall lineup analysis, I guess is a good way to put it. Is there anything that you would like to see? Is there anything you think might be precipitating this? Give us your thoughts so far on what you've liked and disliked from the rotation so far this season.
I would think the two things that are really going to play into that would be the fact that Bogdanović doesn't seem to be on that minutes restriction anymore. And then the other one would be that, Willie Cauley-Stein has struggled all season on defense and is starting to struggle offensively. And so it may be time to cut back his role because he was, I think leading the Kings in minutes for a while there. So I think those are probably the two biggest things he's looking at. And in that sense, it's probably fewer minutes for guys like Shumpert or Justin Jackson, and then fewer minutes for Willie Cauley-Stein, and probably an increase for Harry Giles and Marvin Bagley would be my guess. But outside of that, I can't really think of any major rotation adjustments. I mean, the two guys that are out of the rotation that I'd like to see a little bit more of were Yogi Ferrell and Scal. And I don't know that we're going to see that without an injury. So
I would like to see Bogey come off the bench because there's two clear facilitators on this team. I think it helps the Kings stagger the minutes to have him come off the bench. But there are other scenarios throughout the league where you have the two guys who are the primary drivers of the offense starting, given that they are the best players and they are probably going to be on the floor in the closing minutes when the game is on the line. It probably does make sense to have them starting together. So if he does go in that direction, I can't fault him for it. What was the other one? Oh, Willie. That's right. Willie. We've talked about Willie a ton. Willie played well. Willie played above my expectations for him coming into this season, especially offensively. I did not expect him to take the strides on the offensive end that he did. He has regressed on that end of the floor.
Yeah.
I expect him to make a little bit of a turn back to what he did early in the season because it mainly came down to what kind of position he was getting down there in the post, where he was getting the ball. The further out he gets that ball, the harder it is for him to make a move. He does not have the LaMarcus Aldridge game yet. He does not have any kind of moves. I'm just mentioning Tim Duncan because he's the one coming to mind. But Tim Duncan was good from like 12 to 15 feet out, and that's just not Willie's strength right now. He needs to be getting the ball deep into the post, making a quick move, and going from there. He has been, I don't know what his percentage is from the restricted area, but it's got to be high because just about every time he throws one up there, when he gets the ball in a situation like I'm mentioning, it seems to be going through. He seems to be converting, which is good. Lately, he has not been getting the ball in those situations, and I think it's limiting how well and his offensive production for the Kings. The more they can get him the ball on the post, it's great for their offense. It's almost like transition offense for them because he's converting at such a high rate. They need to be doing more of that, but that is hinging on him making an effort to get in the post, to get that position, to run down the court, to beat the other guy down there so that he can have the opportunity to convert on those chances.
Yeah, he got good position, took advantage of that early in the season. And to me, I saw him sort of have two different games where one of them would be just him focusing on rim running and high quality shots around the basket when he didn't necessarily have that big of an advantage on whoever was guarding him. And then the other is if he ever was guarded by someone that just could not keep up with him athletically, he did start in the high post and he would, take them down low and either use a spin move to get near the rim or just beat them off the dribble in general, however he chose to do it. And now it seems like he's not as focused on rim running. And even when he doesn't have the matchup, he's trying to initiate from the high post and it's just not working. And I don't think he's ever going to have that game really. It's important to remember he's like 25 now. There's some growth left, but it's not like, De'Aaron Fox, who's 20 years old and still probably has plenty of growth left in his game. He's probably close to what he's going to be offensively. I don't know that his shot's that workable. And I think a lot of what he does well is predicated on being a really high level athlete. So, it's really going to come down to him picking his spots better.
Also, Sean, I think the more effort, I'm seeing a lower effort level on the offensive end. Are you also seeing that too?
Maybe less focus, I guess.
Let's focus on the offensive end because we've always said that for the defensive end, at least for defensive rebounding purposes.
Yeah, I mean, he was fantastic early in the season. So, yeah, I would say so.
We could go on in regard to the rotation, and that's what we're going to do because I have some more questions that I want to ask you. There's some other angles to this I want to talk about. Bjelica, I'm concerned because I want him playing more. I think there's arguably times when you could take Willie Cauley-Stein out first instead of him. Yes, it might roast the Kings on defense. I would still like to see the Kings do that instead of taking Bjelica out. I think sometimes it's just a better option. Because he's going to be he can create on offense. I think he's going to be more beneficial to the team in certain instances. I think on Sunday, when it was clear that they did not have the energy, he would have been a guy to keep in. He can get everybody excited, get everybody in the offensive groove by just making a couple really nifty plays. He can take advantage of some smaller guys. The Jazz started Crowder instead of Favors, which is helpful to Bjelica. He can take that guy into the post and punish him. Also, I think it would be beneficial to Marvin Bagley to be playing more with Bjelica as well because like he does for Fox, he helps stretch the floor. He gives Bagley more room to operate. What do you like do you like the pairing of Bjelica and Bagley? Do you think they should be playing more or less together? What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, Bagley's much more aggressive defensively than Willie Cauley-Stein is. And so that, I think, has advantages in certain situations. But you do give up a little bit size-wise when you move from Cauley-Stein to Bagley. At the same time, Willie Cauley-Stein feels a lot to me like a player that you can tell very early on if he's having a good game or a bad game. And so, 6 minutes in, you just take a look and say, is this a good night for Willie Cauley-Stein? And if it's not, then, you don't need to give him the minutes. And as much as, there's been a lot of talk about, he was great for the first few games or 12 games or whatever it was, and now he struggled for 4 or 5. And, that is what it is. I think it's on the Kings to say, look, if we're going to keep a player that's not consistent and doesn't really have that one skill that he's going to bring every day, then as soon as you see he doesn't have it, then he can play 15 to 20 minutes that night.
I like Bielitsa. I think he should be playing more. I think he's I think he's probably a good fit with just about anybody. Yes, he is probably easier to keep on the court when you've got a defensive anchor right next to him, and I think that's part of the calculus from Jaeger is he wants him out there mainly with Willie Cauley-Stein. He's played a little bit with Bagley, but he hadn't really played with anybody else. And Bielitsa has been getting punished down there in the low post by some of these teams. The Jazz were not going to be looking to do that on Sunday. They had Crowder out there at the 4. When they brought in they brought in Favors for Crowder. So they did end up going to that too big lineup. But when they're giving you that time, it seems like the Kings could have flipped their rotation a little bit to alleviate any kind of defensive concerns they could have had out there with Bielitsa. In the backcourt, we've got Frank Mason over Yogi Ferrell. We've also got the backdrop of what happened a couple weeks ago with the Yahoo Sports report. In what Jason Anderson said today, I think he quoted Jaeger as saying that this was a good time to look at the rotation due to it being a couple games off and being 20 games into the season. I'm wondering if that can be used as some sort of an excuse to give some more playing time to the players that Brandon Williams likes more so than others. Do you think this is simply a lineup adjustment due to where we are in this season, or what I just spoke about with Brandon Williams?
I think it's more of a lineup adjustment, and I know a lot of people have made a point of the fact that it seems like Bagley's playing more after that report. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Bagley has been, like, as much as people want to point to the report as the first time that Bagley really got minutes, it's also the first time he'd played well in a few games. And he's played really well since then. Like, he had that 20-point, 17 rebound game. He was good against the Jazz. I think that has a lot to do with him getting more minutes. And I think the fact that Willie Cauley-Stein has kind of struggled over the last 4 or 5 games has also been a factor for Bagley getting more minutes. So I don't know that he's paying that much attention to Brandon Williams at this point. I don't think that that's really the reason behind any of these moves, but it certainly could be.
I think it definitely could be. I think it's definitely playing a small part. I think you're going to see some more minutes from Yogi Ferrell. I think that's going to be a tip-off, because there's one thing that if there is one thing, well, there's many things that we learned from the articles surrounding that Yahoo Sports report. Yogi Ferrell was the guy that Brandon Williams brought into the team. He was actually, no, I don't know if it said that he necessarily brought the guy in, but he liked Yogi Ferrell. He liked what he was going to bring to the team. I expect to see a little bit more from him. I'm not sure what the calculus is for playing Frank Williams over Yogi Ferrell. Anything in particular jumps to your mind as to why Jaeger likes one versus the other?
I mean, Mason was a decently high pick in the draft for a second-round pick at least. And so maybe the Kings view him more as a developmental player, but he has not been good this season, and he wasn't really all that good last season either. So, I mean, I've never been a Frank Mason guy, and I do like Yogi Ferrell, so it's tough for me to say why that might be, but it just seems like maybe they view him as more of a developmental player because he has not been good. And if you even, I'm kind of shocked to see here, he's shooting 17% from 3 this season.
Mason, so you're saying Mason has not been good?
Yeah. Mason hasn't been all that good. That's
funny, because the eye test to me would say he's doing okay. He's not doing great, and he's clearly not doing well enough for Jaeger to play in the second half. I'm not sure when he's actually no. I guess he got into the second half on Sunday. I don't think he played in the second half on Saturday.
I mean, Jaeger doesn't seem to want to play either all that much, but it is true that Frank Mason plays a lot more than Ferrell does.
This is true. Excellent analysis from our Sacramento Kings beat blogger, John Schifferle. Never misses anything. Sharp as a tack.
Anytime. And I would also say that Frank Mason's probably more of a distributor at this point than Farrell is.
That's true. He's not looking for a shot nearly as much.
Yeah.
Which,
so maybe that's why.
The energetic guard off the bench, your job is to get good looks. That's what you want to do. And if those good looks involve you taking shots, that's something that needs to happen. Yeah. I don't think he's looking for a shot enough. I think that's hindering the ability for other guys to get open. If teams can slough off of him or pay him a little less attention, they don't have to clog the lane when he drives, things of that nature. When they can just guard him straight up, it allows everybody else to lock down their man, and other folks really aren't getting open. That's another problem. Well, that is a problem I would see with the second unit. That's something that Yogi Ferrell might be able to fix. You might see him get in there, get a little aggressive, steal some minutes, play some really good basketball, be that aggressive force in there that catapults that second unit so that they can consistently provide some offensive artillery for the Sacramento Kings. One last thing here before we get out. This is something John brought up. I don't want to take credit for this at all. There's been a guy in Philadelphia who's having some issues medically, psychologically. Something of that nature.
Yeah, who knows?
Right now he's being seen by specialists in New York. They're trying to get to the bottom of what's going on. His name is Markelle Fultz, the number 1 pick in the 2017 draft. John would like to, and once again, I'm attributing this to John. John would like to entertain some trade scenarios to get Markelle Fultz to the Kings. Explain, sir, why you would like the Kings to bring in the drama of Markelle Fultz to this organization that clearly does an excellent job of dealing with it.
Well, I'll say first, I was a huge fan of Fultz out of Washington. I think most people were, so that clouds it, I guess you could say, a little bit. But second, I mean, if you look at the difference, and I know that Fultz was more of a surprise, so that makes it harder for Philadelphia, but you look at the difference between the Kings handling Harry Giles and Philadelphia handling Fultz. I think the Sixers could have done a much better job than they did last year. And I know they've, at one point, I think the team said it was a shoulder problem. And if I'm correct, it's been, they've corrected themselves on what exactly the problem was. And I think the PR surrounding Fultz has been really poorly handled. Whereas the PR surrounding Harry Giles, you only saw videos of Giles doing extremely well. And you only heard things that were, really positive about Giles. And so last year he was kind of out of the public eye. And the only time he ever popped up was, oh, look how good Harry Giles is doing. And that led to him sort of having a really easy transition in this second year, even though he did struggle at the beginning and, there wasn't really much made out of it. And I think that has a lot to do with the way the Kings handled the situation. So Fultz is obviously a tougher situation to handle, being a former number 1 overall pick. But I think if he was traded and if he wants to sit, he can sit. If he wants to go to the G League, he can go to the G League. I wouldn't add him to the rotation just because it would mess with a lot of what the Kings are doing right now. And the Kings, really don't need to have non-shooters on the floor. So until he can get that jump shot back, or until he can find another really productive way to contribute, I wouldn't put him in the rotation. But, maybe you can sell Fultz on that, and hopefully you can buy low on a guy that, frankly, it's not like you're replacing De'Aaron Fox. Fultz has size and would easily fit in. If he was what he was at Washington, would easily fit in on or off the ball and would be a great complement to Fox. So, you could really be getting a transcendent player for almost nothing. And I get that there's a ton of risk with that, but it's kind of a risk that I think a team without a number 1 pick in 2019 should be taking.
Okay. Packaged in that way, you may have convinced me. Now,
okay.
I'll give you something else that you need to think about on your end. He's going to be owed $10 million next year.
Yeah.
That's his first option year. Are you cool with $10 million in cap space being tied up in a guy you may get absolutely nothing from next year.
I mean, the Kings are going to have like $50 million to spend anyway, so I wouldn't really mind that at all.
Given that the Kings have a history of having guys on the roster who don't give much and take up cap space, you're still cool with it?
Yeah. For his upside, I would say it's a bet worth making at this point for a team like Sacramento. And like, who are the Kings going to go out and sign for that $10 million?
There's a multitude of great players who would love to come to the Sacramento Kings.
And they'd still have max space if they signed or if they brought Fultz in.
This is true.
Yeah.
Now, are you talking about doing all of this even with having no idea whether or not he can actually play? Or would you only be willing to do this if you figure out what's going on with him?
I've been kind of thinking about that because you brought that up earlier about whether or not I'd want to wait for the specialist opinion and see what exactly the case is. But in my mind, I don't even know if it's better if it's a shoulder problem or a mental issue, because if it's a mental issue, there's no surgery you can have to fix that. There's no specific treatment necessarily for that. I mean, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist, so I can't really speak to it, but I don't really know which I'd even prefer. So it doesn't really matter all that much to me at this point. And if it is a mental issue, I think you send him to either the G League or you just, get him out of the spotlight and help him work on it. If it's a shoulder issue, then you just kind of take it from there. And like you said, they're option years, so you can decline the option if you get to a point where it just doesn't make sense anymore. But you're willing to take it on even though you don't know if he's going to be good or not, regardless of what the issue is. Yeah, well, it's all going to depend on the trade, right? Like, I would need some pretty heavy assurances that he's going to be all right if the Kings were to trade anything that valuable. Like, if you were talking about Buddy Hield or Bogdan Bogdanovic, that's out of the question for me unless he's pretty much fine again. And then I don't think he would be worth a lot more than that at that point. So I think you're buying low, and it's probably a trade of like Iman Shumpert, because Philadelphia could really use a guard like Shumpert, and Kufis. And part of that has to come with Philadelphia recognizing that they're taking a big loss and they're trading, upside for security in the short term so they can compete.
And on that note, we are going to end this episode because my computer is about to run out of power here. I think we did this successfully. Big win for us. You can find John Schifferle on Twitter at John Schifferle. You can find me on Twitter at my buddy Chris. For all of Hoopball's Sacramento Kings coverage on Twitter, it's at Hoopball Kings. And for all of your NBA news, NBA fantasy news, and Sacramento Kings coverage, period, it's hoop-ball.com. Get the fantasy pass, or not the fantasy pass, the season pass now if you're playing fantasy basketball. You can get it for free if you're a new user to DraftKings. Deposit $10 there and you get access to all of the premium content that Hoopball puts out. You can also find this show on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and the iHeartRadio app, which is available for free to download in the iTunes and Google Play stores. For John Schifferle, I'm Christian Villere. See you next time.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.